On today's episode of Bite Sized, we are watching and discussing the 23rd scene of the movie Twilight. For those of you watching along at home, that is from 2909 to 2948. Another short one. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to yet another episode of Bite Sized. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you coming to your phone, I guess. Here's what's going on. My name's Ben. I am watching the movie Twilight, one scene at a time with a different guest every week. For me, I've seen everything that's come before. For my guest, they get anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes of movie and watch it with zero context, unless, of course, they've seen it before. It's a good time for some people, not for me. Joining me today is a podcaster, a market researcher, friend to many improvisers, and also animals, I guess. Jess Mull, thanks for being on Bite Sized.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How's it going? How you doing today
It's
in this
going-
weird, between Christmas and New Year's haze?
Yeah, we're in the middle of almost nothing right now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to have a break.
Have you also forgotten completely what day of the week it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
When I texted you yesterday to be like, oh, are we still doing this? It was because I had forgotten what day it was. And
Yeah.
I looked at my calendar and saw that I had put bite-sized ? And was like, I should reach out to you.
And it's a
about
good thing you
this.
did that, because I fully thought we were recording on Friday, tomorrow.
Yes.
So thank you for being more on board with my own podcast production than I am.
It's okay.
Jess, I'm going to start off this interview the way I start every interview on the show, which is by asking you, what is your history with the Twilight franchise?
I read it pretty much out the gate. So
I
I was
05, 06-ish?
Yeah, I was almost immediately a big fan of the series.
Yeah.
Like, I read all of the books. I did the midnight premieres as the books came out and like went to Meyer with my sister and stood in line because that was also
Meyer,
I think,
like the store?
like the store in
Okay.
Michigan where I grew up.
Got it. Not Meyer like Stephanie Meyer, the author of Twilight.
No. Meyer, Meijer.
Yeah.
If you grew up in Michigan, you'll know what it is. Probably no one else will.
And this is where you bought your books?
This is where I bought my book. Well, they would have, it was like the only grocery store in town, and there weren't any bookstores in town.
Uh-huh.
So if there was like this book, like they did with the Harry Potter books, where they would
Yeah.
make a big deal about midnight releases of the book, they did the same thing for Twilight.
Yeah.
And so people would dress up as vampires and go get their Twilight books. And I also read a lot of Twilight fan fiction.
Okay.
As it happened, I was deep in the fandom. So a lot of Tumblr, when that happened, a lot of fanfiction.net.
What is that world like? Because the fan fiction side of Twilight is something I've never dipped my toe into.
Oh, I mean, Twilight is probably in the top 3 like biggest modern fandoms.
I mean, famously,
it's huge.
Twilight fan fiction has gone on to become
50 Shades,
50
of, Grey.
Shades of Grey, of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And many others probably that aren't quite as obvious.
No.
I read 50 Shades of Grey I dipped into it very briefly when it was still a fanfic.
Okay.
And that was when it was on like LiveJournal or something.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, mainly it was just a lot of really horny teenage girls writing a lot of smutty vampire stuff
Yeah.
and just working through their horniness that way. And it was great. It worked out really well for
That's
a lot
good.
of people. But yeah, it's one of those foundational fandoms. It's not as big anymore, but it's still pretty. I'll still see it every once in a while. A pretty good Twilight fanfic pop up.
I'm sure it's still out there.
It's still
yeah,
happening,
if you're looking
yeah,
for it.
yeah.
Did you ever write or did you just read?
I just read.
Okay.
I wrote.
You don't have to.
I wrote a very embarrassing Pirates of the Caribbean fanfic.
Oh, yeah.
And then never tried again.
Yeah.
Fanfic is really hard to write.
It really is. It seems easy when you start doing it.
Did
And
you
then
write fanfic?
I tried once.
Oh,
and
for what? Tell us, man.
Have you ever heard of the Redwall series?
No.
Okay.
Okay. I
That's-
gotta go figure out what that is.
Yeah. It's this series of sort of like kids fantasy novels
Great.
think like very toned down, like Narnia, Lord of the Rings, and all the characters are like mice and squirrels and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it lends itself to fan fiction.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It honestly, it really does.
Yeah.
And that was sort of my first dip into creative writing, and I made it less than a chapter.
Yeah.
I had like a vague story outline
Yeah.
and sort of half an idea for the climax, and I got like a page and a half into sort of, you know, this weird scene, not even close to the beginning of the story, and was just like, well, I'm out of ideas. I'm going to stop now.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know what happened to that. It's probably still in some notebook in my parents' house.
Probably, yeah. We, on our second season, our guest was Will.
Second season of what now?
Oh, of our podcast.
No, tell me about the podcast.
Oh, it's called Femmes Reading Phil.
Oh, Femmes Reading Filth. I think I've heard that about that show before, maybe mentioned on episode 3 with special guest Emily
Barujan, who's my co-host.
Barujan.
And then have you had Will Nicholson on?
Yes, episode 2.
He was our season 2 guest.
And episode 1, Sarah Murphy, who was on your live show.
So like,
we know all the same people, Jess.
But yeah, we basically talk about romance novels and erotica, and so every episode our guest names a trope for us, and then I bring a fanfic and Emily brings a romance novel as a way to discuss the trope. And trope we mean very, very, very loosely. But for the second season, Will Nicholson was our guest, and he tried to write some fanfic.
Oh, really?
And he
like specifically for the show, or
like he was reading through a fantasy series, because at the end of every episode we have a bit that's called "What are you reading?" and we just talk about what we've been reading. And the entire season, he had been working his way through a series. And at the end, as a gift to us, he tried to give us some fan fiction he had written for it. And he only got through the first chapter because he said it was way hard. He got way more invested and worried about it than he thought he would. And he wasn't able to finish it.
It's in general so much harder to write anything.
Yes.
Than you think it's going to be when you start.
Especially when you're trying to mimic the voice of another piece of work.
Yeah,
and it takes a lot to nail it.
Once, as just sort of an exercise, I wrote a spec script for a TV show.
Yeah.
And it was like 25 pages, and it was so hard.
Yes!
It should be so easy, but it's like the hardest thing.
And I honestly think that's why there's so much Twilight and Harry Potter fan fiction, because quite frankly, they leave enough plot holes in the world that you can fill in without being super intimidated.
And there's a lot of like very distinct sort of pre-built characters that you can sort of
glom
play
your
around
own
with,
shit
like
on.
action figures.
Yeah.
You can just put them in your various situations.
Exactly.
Let's get into the scene. Let's get into what we're here to ostensibly talk about. It is less than a minute. Charlie's in the kitchen eating something. Bella walks in.
Your mom called again.
Well, it's your fault. You shouldn't have told her about the almost accident. You finished?
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose you're right. She always didn't know how to worry. She seems different. She seems happy. Phil sounds like an all right guy.
Yeah, he is.
All right.
She leaves.
Yep.
That's it.
You really gave me the divorced dad scene.
I sure
of
did,
my
didn't
dream.
I? Of your dreams.
Yeah, I was
Speak
worried.
on that.
Well, I was worried when you pitched this to me and asked me on, and I haven't heard any of the previous episodes.
Yeah.
But my thought was, what am I going to be able to talk about out of 30 seconds? But the stilted, just anxious energy of Charlie is something that I've always loved.
Yeah,
and
really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because in the movie and just in general, he is so awkward.
He is. He's a weird guy.
Yeah, he's one of the only normal people in the entire show. He's just a dad doing his best.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that about him.
This scene, it really sticks out in the rest of the movie because it has nothing to do with vampires or anything. It's just a weird little 40-second glimpse into the sort of the bleak small town lives of this weird father-daughter relationship that does not feel like it takes place in a YA romance novel. It's a little more Tennessee Williams than that, because it's a lot of talking about your ex-wife and she seems different now. She seems
happy now.
That's
your
so
mom
sad.
Your mom seems happier now. It's a crazy thing to just put in.
What a profoundly sad thing to lay on your daughter.
Right after she had an accident, which I don't remember what the accident was.
It's when she almost gets hit by the van in the parking lot and Edward rushes over to stop it.
That one.
Yeah. What is Charlie doing? Because he's not at work.
No.
I guess it's his day off.
I don't know, because has she just come home from school, presumably, or something?
So the scene right before this is the field trip to the little composting greenhouse thing.
Yes.
And so I guess
it's during the week.
there's no way of knowing what day of the week it is, I guess. But I think we're supposed to assume that this is a school day.
Yeah.
And she just got home.
Yeah.
And there's dad at 4 o'clock.
Drinking a beer.
Drinking a beer.
And having just finished, I think, a sandwich and
Yeah.
some chips or
and
something.
reading the newspaper.
Yeah. That is a great point.
This scene, as short as it is, really tells you a lot about Charlie's life and raises a lot of questions about what is this guy doing?
I think he's just sad.
He for sure is sad, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't even know. I don't think we ever actually learn what Charlie does for a living.
Oh, no, we do.
Oh, what does he
He's
do?
a cop.
He's a cop?
Yeah, he's like the chief of the Forks Police Department.
Oh my God, I forgot about
When was
that.
the last time, Jess, when was the last time you watched Twilight?
Oh, it's been many, many, many years.
Clearly.
It's been many years.
Clearly.
And when I've watched or read fan fiction about Twilight, they're not really focusing on the backstory of Charlie Swan.
Really?
No, not all that much.
That's shocking because I feel like he would be a major figure.
I wish that there was. I'm gonna go dig for it after we record this.
I'm sure.
Like a fanfic of the whole series from Charlie's perspective.
Uh-huh.
Just being confused and wondering what's going on with his daughter.
I mean, Stephanie Meyer, she just wrote Midnight Sun.
Yes.
Which is the first
Edward's
book from
perspective.
Edward's perspective. I really think there is a market for the first book from Charlie's perspective.
I think it would be a lot shorter, but it could be interesting.
It would be more fun.
It
That's
would
for
be
sure.
more fun.
Yeah.
And more relatable, because it would really just be about him and his feelings about his ex-wife.
Right.
And how she has a new boyfriend now, and he feels weird about that.
Right.
And he has to talk to his daughter, who he doesn't seem to have ever really spent much time with.
Right. And also he has to investigate these weird murders that keep showing up around town.
Yes.
Are they an animal? So you can have sort of like a weird mystery novel almost, like a detective story.
I really think if anybody listening has any fan fiction background and wants to write this, I think we've got a gem on our
I
hands.
really do. Actually, if anyone is listening and has a fan fiction background, don't write this because it's ours now. I think we own it.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we just talked for 5 minutes about how hard it is to write fan fiction. So I
That
don't
is
know.
true.
I don't know if we're the right people to shepherd this story into the
Okay,
world.
if you're a fan fiction writer and you want to write this story, you have to credit me and Jess.
Bite
Yeah.
Size Pod. Please,
Yeah.
please, and thank you.
In this scene, Charlie and Bella wearing the exact same outfit. Jeans, flannel, sort of a whitish grayish undershirt.
Mm-hmm.
You think someone would have noticed and said, "Hey, is this weird that they're dressed I get it. You know, that's a very common outfit to wear
Yeah.
in, the North where it's a little bit colder."
I think that's kind of probably what happened. Is someone from LA went, "What do they wear in Seattle
Yeah.
and adjacent areas?" Flannel, jeans. We don't have to worry too much about this.
And to be fair, it's cold and slightly rainy outside right now.
Right.
And when I leave the house later today, I will probably be wearing jeans and a flannel.
Yeah.
But even the colors are just so similar. You think someone would have said, "Hey,
Yeah.
maybe let's give him a blue shirt so they don't look completely identical."
No, we were really trying to draw parallels about how awkward.
Oh,
both of
you think
these
this is
characters
intentional?
are. I don't know, because so much of this movie.
No, let's read deep into the metaphor of Twilight
Listen,
here.
you gave me 30 seconds,
Uh-huh.
and I'm gonna get into it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that is what this show is, you understand. This
Right.
is, the name of the show may as well be Benet Bear Presents Over-Analysis.
Over-analysis
Right.
of, yeah. Well, because this movie was, and it was filmed like an indie, but presumably had a huge budget. Because,
Filmed like an indie in what way?
well, they hired a indie director, Catherine Hardwicke, and Kristen Stewart was up until this point only an indie darling.
Panic Room, I don't think. Zathura was not exactly an indie movie.
But I think it's acted and filmed like a low budget movie.
Oh my God.
In a way that blockbusters nowadays would never ever be. There's a tone to franchises nowadays,
Yeah.
and this movie does not look or feel like that, and this scene in particular doesn't.
No.
And I think that they probably had thousands and thousands of dollars to spend on costumes, and they must have made a choice somewhere along the way that they were not going to do that, and they were instead just going to go full muted panels and undertones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and costuming is very, you can tell they put a lot of thought into it, but really mainly with the Cullens,
Yeah.
who are always dressed so cool.
Slightly elevated, like clearly not high schoolers.
Right, like they just walked out of their job as Abercrombie mannequins.
Right.
Bella's always a little, I don't know, a little grungier, Seattle-y, a little, bulkier, oversized jackets and stuff.
Which is okay if we're fully overanalyzing this.
Yeah, and we are.
Do you think it's because she's just moved there from Phoenix and this is how Bella thinks she should be dressing to fit in with the town?
I think this is supposed to represent her being in her shell and covering up with lots of layers and everything, so she doesn't seem like anything interesting to look at.
Got it.
She's just a great big pile of flannel and denim.
You think she's hiding
Yes,
the magnificence
and
within?
As the series goes on and she comes into her own, she starts dressing a little more fashionably. But
she doesn't though. She does. She
mean,
still looks kind of like a mom.
I guess as fashionably as you could expect.
Yeah,
for...
she never goes full Cullen, I don't think. Did you notice how she flubbed her backpack being put down?
No, I didn't.
Clearly there was a direction that Kristen Stewart put her backpack on the chair and it falls off the chair.
Yeah, I just picked it up and watched it. And yes, she does a very bad job of putting her backpack on the chair and it falls down and she just rolls with it.
She just rolls with it. And
She's
it was
a real
one of those
pro.
things that I noticed. I was like, oh, that made the final cut. Or they shot this twice because it is a nothing scene.
Yeah, I guess that this was probably just the best take.
Yeah.
And they were just like, all right, let's move on.
Mm-hmm. She also fills a glass of water, takes one drink, and then immediately pours the rest down the sink.
Yes, want to talk about
There
that.
were so many choices.
Yeah, Charlie has a plate that I'm assuming used to have a sad ham sandwich on it.
Yeah, but it's still got stuff on it. I couldn't tell what it was on it.
Yeah, looking at it, it's maybe just like a little bit of crust or something. And she takes his plate and puts it in the sink. And while she's at the sink, she picks up a cup that had to have been sitting next to the sink.
Yeah.
Which I assume means it's a dirty cup.
Yeah.
Like it had just been used. Or maybe it was washed and left to dry out there. I don't know. She fills it about halfway up with
tap water.
Lukewarm tap water.
Yep.
Takes a tiny sip that looks like the sort of acting sip where you don't actually let any water get in your mouth.
The water touches your lips. Yep, that.
Yeah, just like that. No, listener, I just demonstrated with my glass of water for Jess and no one else.
Picture Ben.
Just imagine.
You probably don't know what Ben looks like either, but just picture Ben not actually drinking water.
Go to the show's Instagram. There's pictures of me there. Look at one of them and imagine me
not drinking water.
Taking a fake sip of water. Yeah, she takes the tiniest sip and then she sort of looks at the cup like she's mad at it. And clearly she's sort of mad at Charlie for something.
She's annoyed that he told her mom that she almost got hit by a van.
Which I think is a fair thing to tell her.
I think Charlie was being a good dad.
Especially because I'm assuming he said that, when if I recall the scene correctly, I think he tells her that while Bella's at the hospital and before he knows everything's okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's it's probably good to communicate that sort of thing to your ex-wife and Phil.
I think so.
Yeah.
And Phil.
I'm glad Phil.
Phil.
I wish we got to know more about Phil.
I do too. And you know nothing. You know almost nothing about her mom, and you know even less about Phil.
No. One day there is a scene coming up as I've watched these movies for my study. There's a scene coming up where we learn about her mom and Phil and just the way Stephanie Meyer knows nothing about either of the two occupations she's given those characters.
Really?
There's at some point we learn that they're sitting in this incredibly lavish beach house directly on the ocean. And we learn that Phil is a minor league baseball player.
Oh my God, I forgot about this.
And the mom is a substitute English teacher.
Yes.
And there is no way, even before the housing bubble,
that they are making a living of any kind.
They cannot afford that house.
No. And by contrast, Charlie has a very stable job
government
and should
salary,
be proud of himself.
Good benefits,
he
owns
has
a house.
He's doing fine.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the hidden reason she did have to go up to Forks is the mom was like, times are tough right now in the minor league baseball game, and you've got to go live with your dad.
Right.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
Oh, but what if oh my God, Phil can come and play baseball with the Cullens, though.
Yeah,
I
he
mean-
would get destroyed because apparently he can't even hack it in the majors.
Right. He
So
can't live up.
no,
to
he can't.
the
Look,
Cullens.
if he can't make it in the Big Show, there's no way he could make it in the Vampire
Carlisle's
Show.
coming for him. Clearly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All that to say, she does do that thing with the cup.
She does do
That's-
that weird thing with the cup.
that's
and
what
it
we're
is-
coming back
There's a
around
lot of
to.
prop work with the newspaper, with the cup, with the. She checks the bag of potato chips.
Yeah,
to
to
if
see
it's-
how many.
Yeah,
how he's doing.
if she's gonna throw it out or not. Very, very skilled.
Really, a
with
lot of
that.
business going on.
A lot of business going on with the food.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really does feel like a scene out of a play more
little
than a
bit.
scene out of a vampire romance novel.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, the more we talk about it, the more I like it.
So then, what's the point of this scene? Why is it even in the movie?
I really do feel like because Catherine Hardwicke,
Yes.
right? Because she's so indie,
Yeah.
I do feel like she attempted throughout the movie to humanize and put in elements that weren't just the vampire part of it.
Yeah.
And it felt like this was her attempt to give the watcher some understanding of Bella and Charlie's relationship.
Yeah.
Which I honestly, if I am right and that was the point, I think they do a pretty good job.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think?
I mean, sure. There's lots of little character moments, especially between Bella and Charlie in the first half hour
Yeah.
or however far we are into this movie. And maybe this is something that when you're watching this movie in the way that we are,
Yeah.
one scene at a time, it doesn't seem important. This is something that I discovered. I think I talked about this on a previous episode. But when you watch a movie like this, one scene at a time,
Yeah.
it really makes you appreciate how many scenes there are in a movie that are just nothing. There's so much, just like in any movie you watch, if you
Right.
really break it down this intensely, there's just some filler in there. And like, unless it's like a perfect, amazing, great movie, even
Yeah.
those still probably have some. But sometimes there's just scenes in there that maybe in this case, in the case like Twilight, this was in the book, so it's got to be on the screen.
Yeah.
And they gotta hit a certain runtime and everything. And they need to sort of get from one plot point to the next plot point.
Right.
And so there's just
Because are we about halfway through the first movie at this point?
No.
We're like right at the beginning, right?
we are still at this is 2909 through
Okay.
2948. And the movie, including credits, is right around 2 hours.
I honestly feel like they may have just needed to remind us that there is a mom that needs to be filled in on things because of later in the movie
That is possible.
where they have that whole where she ghosts back.
Yeah.
And they have to take a moment to be like, hey, remember that there's this whole other situation with your parents
Right.
and that's going to come back later. So it may have also been for that reason.
I also don't remember what happens directly after this scene, so maybe there's a good reason for her to be at home talking to Charlie, but this 39 seconds.
Yeah. I don't even remember either.
It's weird. This little chunk of movie doesn't hold up on its own.
Yeah.
It doesn't stand alone.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
I feel like you're going to run into that a lot more with later films in the franchise.
Twilight, the first movie, Twilight, makes a lot of crazy choices. And I feel like the movie sort of toned that down a little bit as time goes on. And they have like, no, hold on. I know you gave me this look like you don't believe me.
I don't
And
believe you.
The crazy choices that are in the book, still there, still crazy. We will talk about them when we get there in 1 to 7 years.
Right.
But from a filmmaking standpoint, you can feel a little bit more the studio saying, hey, we have a big franchise now. Let's play it a little more safe.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
it definitely goes back. It goes more into what I was talking about earlier, where it's a little more cookie cutter.
Yes.
It's not shot like a weird indie movie
Uh-huh.
and things like that. But there are werewolves in the next
There
one.
are.
And having just recently watched New Moon,
Yes.
it is insane.
It is.
Some of the choices that are made.
But it's not, I'm gonna do something I don't think I've ever done before, but I'm gonna be the first one to bring it up now. When I watched New Moon for the first time after starting to do this podcast, I was like, oh no, it's not blue anymore.
yeah.
And that's the Bluebell. For those of you who are new to the show, the Bluebell is something I introduced because guests tend to bring up just how blue Twilight is,
It is very
and the
blue.
crazy, insane color grading. And whenever someone brings that up, I ring the Bluebell. And this time, I was the first person to bring it up.
You did.
I've never done it before. I've never instigated the Blue Bell. I usually try to make my guests do it, but I think it's worth talking about.
It really needed it.
Like,
Were you trying to lead me to that?
Sometimes I will. When you started talking about how it's shot like an indie movie, I think I said something like, what do you mean? Shot like an indie movie? Like how? And I'll really try to guide my guests.
And I
into
sidestepped
it.
you masterfully there, even though I didn't know what you were doing.
Even though you had no idea and maybe didn't even see the bell.
No, I saw the bell. I just thought that maybe you had a bell on your table.
It has a purpose.
I didn't read into it.
But all that to say, like, I think that's a good example, a little microcosm of how the later movies do get more cookie cutter. Yeah. And a big example of that is the color is just more normal.
Yep.
It's just sort of more straight down the middle.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's sad. Honestly,
you wish that it had kept the tone.
Yes,
throughout?
because if it had been weird and blue all throughout, I think that would have been a very cool choice.
Yeah.
I think it makes doing that in Twilight stick out in a weird way. If you were to watch them all, you'd be like, oh, hey, this one movie is super blue.
Yeah.
And then the rest aren't. So clearly, like, a choice was
Something
made.
happened.
They decided that was a bad idea. Color grading is a artistic choice, and obviously as they change like directors and cinematographers, they're all going to have their own different approaches to it, but I think it would be fun to see that sort of stylistic consistency throughout the franchise.
I agree. I think it would have I think it would have made the franchise more memorable,
right?
And possibly also honestly helped with some of the bad CGI later. Like,
maybe
it could have had some fun effects.
Maybe. And like, it's one of those things that, like, when I was watching New Moon and I realized it's not blue, it made me think, like, oh no, my favorite thing about this podcast so far has been combing through Twilight with a magnifying glass and like looking at these strange things. Does that mean I'm going to run out of strange things in the future movies? And like, the strange big things will still be there, but the strange little things,
you'll still be able to like feel how much Robert Pattinson hates everything. The
American accent that he has to do.
Oh,
yes.
Everything, every single thing. That was one of my favorite things when I was in the fandom back in the day. Like when they first started filming the movies, it was watching interviews with Robert Pattinson where he was clearly just didn't want to be there.
Did your Twilight experience turn out to be what you expected?
Oh, it was so long.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And we were shooting it forever.
Were you happy with your pay?
I don't know. Could have been better. I hardly get to do any vampire stuff. I mean, I don't get to kill anyone. My entire performance is based on having extreme discomfort having contact lenses in your eyes, just kind of like that the entire time.
Which one of your coworkers helped make your Twilight experience the most rewarding?
Huh. I can't think of anything. I would say, SK2 face packs.
It lends a lot to my watch of the series now, because it's just lovely to know that he is hating his life the entire time.
Remember when Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, we were supposed to believe they were like dating in real life?
And no one believed it.
Did anyone ever believe that was anything other
so.
than the studio trying to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was 100. Every queer woman, which I am one, has always looked at Kristen Stewart and gone,
yeah.
You may not be a full lesbian, but at the very least, you're on our team in some way.
Right.
And Robert Pattinson does not feel like the right man
No.
for you.
And there's, yeah. At the end of the scene, after she dumps out the water, Kristen Stewart sort of says half a sentence and then makes a weird noise.
She just like doesn't even finish talking and leaves the room.
No, she just makes like a weird horse noise, like a.
All right.
She kind of like sighs, and maybe I would understand it a little bit more if I was a child of divorce.
I guess.
But maybe you just can't be in the same room as your dad anymore sometimes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, it's the holidays. I'm sure
I
we
guess
all
this is the
just
time.
went through.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm sure a lot of us just had a moment of not being able to be in the same room as their dad.
Yeah, now that you put it that way, I'm having flashbacks to 3 days ago.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, not me,
Yeah.
but I'm sure some other people.
I love trying to hug my dad and getting a side hug instead.
Good time.
Classic experience.
Yeah. If you had to give this scene a name, what would it be? And this is also going to be the name of the episode, so make it good.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, remember when I said I was going to put you on the spot a couple times? This is the first one.
I think it's got to be divorced dad energy.
DDE.
DDE.
All right.
Yeah.
That's what this scene is, just basically almost a minute of DDE.
Of DDE.
And it's sad and
Pretty
it's
intensely.
weird. Very, very strong.
Or it could be child of divorce energy, so just CDE.
It could be. I think it's really is the dad energy though
It
that
feels
sort of defines
it's very
the scene.
yeah. He's
But
in
also,
the center
it
of
does
the frame.
have that. Yeah, but it does have that divorced child energy where like Bella is cleaning up after him and is like his daughter, but is also taken on like that sort of
The mommy,
housekeeping
yeah.
mom wife duty. Yeah, and that's sad.
Isn't that? We
It
just
really
keep
is.
finding layers in this scene.
This is just a very this scene is blue in more ways than one. Jess Mull, if people like this cut of your jib and the sound of your voice and want to learn more about you and the things that you do, where can they do that? Maybe on social media.
They should check out the Femmes Reading Filth podcast.
Yeah.
We are Femmes Reading Filth on everything. Our main platform is Instagram.
Yeah.
We're on everywhere that you listen to podcasts. And we currently have 2 full seasons out, plus many, many live shows and special episodes. And we're in the middle of recording our 3rd season.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have, if you're based in Chicago, we have a couple live shows coming up, one of which is at Otherworld Theater for their Twihard Festival.
Okay.
Which you may or may not be involved in.
I've heard rumors that you're going to be doing a Twilight episode.
We are
within the
doing a
next few
Twilight
months.
episode.
Yeah.
And so if you want to, really dig into Twilight, you should come out to Otherworld Theater for that. And then they also have another festival in March. So if you want to, see me in person, come to some of those live events.
There you go. If you like the show, you can follow it on social media at bitesizedpod_. Almost forgot my own social media handles. At bitesizedpod_ on Instagram and TikTok. If you want to communicate with the show, send a message to one of those accounts or send an email to myfavoritetwilightpodcast@gmail.com. I tried to start an account that involved the name of the show and they were all taken. Thank you so much to my editor, Ben Oxshire, for putting it all together and making things sound good.
Ben is on one of our episodes, by the way.
He really is.
Ben is on our Christmas episode.
He's a delight.
He's a
He
delight.
was on the last episode of this podcast.
Shout out to
will
Ben
be-
Oxshire.
He does a good job. Ben, feel free to cut this out if you don't want us to tell the
Leave it
world
in,
how
Ben.
great you are.
Leave it in.
If you like the show, please consider giving us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or your app of choice. That'll sort of help the algorithm suggest us to more people, or suggest us to more people yourself. Tell a friend. Word of mouth truly is the best way to get stuff out there. Thank you to the band Swimwear Department for letting us use their song Mauled to Death for their theme. Check them out wherever you find music. And that is it. That is all we have for today. That is another episode of Bite Sized in the Can, as we always say at the end of every episode.
What? What? Bite-sized?
That's it. What bite-sized? See you next time.